Okay, we are looking at question 2 from your free response 1 assignment right here. So in question 2, we are given a supply and demand graph of a country we're calling country X, and we're looking at this before international trade. So that's the way we first want to look at this graph, and we want to identify, before there's any trade at all on this graph, where the equilibrium price and quantity would be. So I'm going to jump over to my other drawing here. And so this is your graph. Now, the way we want to look at this is that we know that this curve right here represents domestic supply of grain. So this is what the country X is able to supply. And this is the demand curve in country X. So without any trade at all, our equilibrium price and quantity is going to be right here where the demand curve intersects the supply. So we're going to be at P1 for price and Q3 for quantity. That is the equilibrium price and quantity before trade. Easy enough, right? Okay. The next thing we're asked in part A2 is we need to, before trade, we need to identify the areas of consumer surplus and the area of producer surplus. Now, when you're answering this, you're going to need to use the letters to identify the areas. So if we know this is the price right here, P1, and this is the demand curve right here, the supply curve, and this is the demand, we know that before trade, consumer surplus is going to be this area right here. The area above the price and below the marginal benefit or the demand curve. So that's going to be area, and you would just write on your write in your answer that consumer surplus is area H. Okay. Now for producer surplus, it's going to be more than one of the lettered areas, and that's going to be, let me drag this over, that's going to be this area right here, the area below the price P1 and above the supply or marginal cost curve, and that's going to be areas I plus L plus T. That's going to be the producer surplus at this point right here, okay, at the equilibrium before trade. All right, what's next? So now we need to look at part B, and we want to use the labeling of the graph, and we want to identify the amount of grain that country X will import if it engages in trade. So how much are they going to import if they engage in trade and the world price of grain drops down to PW? Okay, so let's go back to our drawing here, and let's just move this out so we don't get confused. So we're saying that we're dropping the price from P1 down to PW, and we're going to engage in trade with the world at the world price. Well, at this price, we can see that the domestic supply, or the amount that country X is going to supply in the market, is going to drop from Q3 down to Q1. So this is going to be the amount supplied in the domestic market. However, since the price has dropped, the domestic demand moves from Q3 up to Q5, or up. When I say up, I mean the quantity is increasing. The quantity demanded goes from Q3 to Q5 as we move down the demand curve. So we're actually moving down the curve to a lower price and a higher quantity demanded. So if country X is supplying at Q1, but the consumers in country X are demanding at Q5, then this difference from Q1 to Q5 is what the country will need to import. Will want to import in a quantity of grain. So you can simply identify the quantity by saying it is Q5 minus Q1. It's the difference between Q1 and Q5, which is mathematically Q5 minus Q1. Okay. So that takes care of B. Okay. So that's the quantity that's going to be imported, Q5 minus Q1. Now we move to a C, and we are going to assume that the country X imposes a tariff that raises the price of grain from the free trade price PW, the world price, up to price T. So using the labeling of the graph, we want to identify the changes in each of the following: the domestic production, consumption, and the changes in consumer surplus and producer surplus. Now, this is a little bit tricky because we're saying a change from the world situation. Okay, so what is the world situation, and how is it going to change? So let me just jump back to make sure I'm answering everything. So we want the production, the consumption, and the surpluses. Okay, so in production, which is the supply, we're supplying at the world price Q1. At the tariff price PT, we're supplying right here at Q2. So the difference in what they're calling, let me jump back, the difference in production or supply is going to be Q2 minus Q1, the difference right here. Now, in consumption, demand is actually shrinking because as the price goes up from PW to PT, demand drops from Q5 to Q4. So consumption is going to be the difference. The difference in consumption is going to be a decrease in consumption equal to Q5 minus Q4. Okay, so that takes care of the differences in production and consumption. Now, consumer surplus. Well, first we need to look at what was consumer surplus at the world price. And I'm going to bring this guy over here in. Yeah. Actually, did I show you? I think I did. I had this guy here and this guy here, right? For the consumer and the producer surplus before a trade. Okay, I'm not sure if I did that or not. I think I did. Anyway, when we have trade, because the price drops, we have much more. Our consumer surplus jumps up to here. Now it's not asking you that. It's asking you the difference between this and what it is with the tariff. Okay, so that's why it's tricky. So the question, if we jump back over here, it wants to know the change after the tariff. Well, actually, the change from the free trade situation to the tariff. So we're going from here, how it was for a free trade, to how it's going to be with the tariff, which means we're simply going to subtract from, well, this is going to be represented by just writing out H plus I plus J plus K plus L plus M plus N plus N plus R plus S. But what they're asking is what it is after the tariff. So we want to take this and shrink it up to here And the difference is we no longer have L, M, N, R, or S. We only have H, I, J, and K for consumer surplus. So you want to make sure you're clear on that change and how you describe it. Now, when we look at the producer surplus, we were after trade. We were just here, only T only, right? Because the price is here, the supply curve is here, so very small producer surplus with bill trade. However, when we jump up to the tariff price, we expand a producer surplus to include both T and L. So if you just say, so when you're answering this, you can simply say that with the tariff, the consumer surplus is H plus I plus J plus K. And if you want to be more detailed, you can say that it is that the change from the free trade situation is that you lose in consumer surplus L plus M plus N plus R plus S. And in a producer, you can say you've changed from only a T when we had free trade. With the tariff, the change with a producer surplus is you add L. Okay, so it's T plus L. That's how you would answer that in this type of a question. So if you have this type of a question that's got a graph with letters that are identifying areas, then you want to use those letters to answer your questions, okay? And I believe that takes care of question 2. Yep. We will talk about question 3 on the next video.